Hey, first time on your stream, do you have any suggestions on apps or studying techniques for languages? What are you currently using? Are you using anything? Uh, Ore Kamiya? Dare Kamiya? What are you using currently? What have you used? Have you ever learned a language before? I'm curious, all of these things. What do you use for studying before this? Like, maybe not language related. Duolingo, Anki, and some other stuff? That sounds amazing. Are you concerned with that what you're doing now requires more suggestions? I feel like a combination of Duolingo, Anki, and some other stuff, maybe like grade readers. I don't know if you're interested in grade readers. Comprehensible inputs with vlogs and podcasts are kind of thing. You learned German sort of, but in school, okay. And school wasn't did that work? Did that not work? Like, not that school stuff didn't work for you, did it? Was it like Did you learn anything about what you would do in the school setting? Any of that worked? There are grade readers and comprehensible input vlogs and podcasts that you might be interested in if you haven't already been doing that. You can understand it pretty well, but not fluent at all. Okay, okay. So did the school work then? Because you can probably do some techniques, whatever you use in school can be also things that you may be able to use now. And no, you didn't. You played some of the rhythm games in arcade, but none of the drum ones. I should have, maybe next time. Tisk tisk. Asking someone if they know taiko and didn't even play a taiko machine in like Osaka or something. Not even in a Sega arcade. Actually, were you there when Sega arcade was still open, or was it after they closed? As for the mansplaining, I just keep copying from Google to mansplain. All right. 0 out of 10 for effort, but 12 out of 10 for effect. Greg. In terms of techniques, like studying techniques, I think one underrated thing, I think the aspect of homework and testing worked. Interesting. So here's the thing. So if the homework and testing part, but it's hard to do alone. Yeah, so instead of like structure, right? I know homework has structure. Their homework does structure and it's aided. So homework gives you like things to do, right? Things to do. And also, sorry, this is a setup. Testing is also structured in the sense that it gives you something to do to guide you. One thing that self-study, when I think of people self-studying, is that they sometimes don't get a chance to output engage how much they remember, right? So this is kind of like testing. It is kind of like testing. Testing homework, like using homework and testing. And every once in a while, I think this is an underrated thing that many overlook, which is go grab a piece of paper. Go grab a piece of paper. Assign yourself a theme. A theme. Like, however long you want that you can persist on focusing without the urge to go to like a dictionary or something. Say, I'm going to the park. Or you can journal if you want. You can journal or something. So you went to a park one day. Imagine yourself going to a park. Or you could literally go to a park and have some fresh air and touch grass and whatnot, etc. Go to a park and then write. Using recall only. So what sometimes, so when you have Duolingo, Anki, and other apps, usually most of them are aided. So they're aided space repetition. So SRS, right? Space repetition. You probably heard that quite a lot of times if you're already into Anki and Duolingo. The end result is they don't do recall, unaided recall. So every once in a while, like homework and testing, which may work, you can break out a piece of paper or break out your phone, right? Break out your phone, hit your notes app or whatever app you use to make dialogues to yourself, like notebooks to yourself, and think of where you are, right? And look around like you're at home. Write about it. Use your Japanese, if you're learning Japanese, to write about what you see. And then make note, in my opinion, make note of all the things you can't express yet as well. Like, for example, even though you can write some Japanese, fill it in. Fill it in with your whatever words, whatever common language you're using. And every time you see your common language, those are the reminders of you. I either can't express this yet, or I haven't seen it yet. And then for the future, when that word comes up, it'll be really cool. It'll be like, yes, I can finally go back, flip to that page, and it's like, yes, this is the word. Now you can fill it in. So it kind of encourages you to test yourself or give yourself homework, but it'll be kind of a fun homework. Everything will be related to what you're doing, and also it will do something that no app can replace. So apps cannot replace total recall. If you can't recall it with a blank piece of paper in front of you, these apps are there to help you, but they can't ultimately make you do those things. So that's probably my thing. I do this for 30 minutes at the beginning of every stream. So if you're curious what that looks like for me, after like 100+ days of Duolingo Japanese, and then every 25 days I have a test for myself. I review as many things as I can possibly remember in the last 25 days, which is coming up soon because it's day 121. So it's kind of like a test and a homework, but it's fun because you're writing it, you're doing all the stuff, and then you can learn about yourself whether you don't want to use the word or you can use the other word. So if you're already doing that, then there's really not much more. You can do whatever you want, because if you can test yourself and you can always like evaluate yourself without anyone's help, that's one of the best advice that you can give yourself and to anyone else, right? How to accurately monitor if something works or not. Now you can go out and try whatever you want, but you know you can test yourself on what your competence is. And that's probably the only, honestly, if I had to do like a 15-minute bit, I would probably start there. So if you're already doing that, only time is, in my opinion, the remaining factor. Right? That makes so much sense. Oh my god. So I like writing down a weekly wrap up of what I learned. Yeah. And make it fun, right? Make it involving what you want. Write a journal, like even brag in the journal. Like say, hey journal, today, this week, I nailed it. Here are my 40 kanji I learned, and I'm just gonna write it out. Like you're talking to yourself. You're reminding yourself. Later, a week later, you'll be able to read that what you were thinking in the previous week. So what happens is it's a great reminder, and it starts piling up. You'll start, and you know, here's a last plug for that. If you can write it and express it to yourself on a piece of paper without aid, when you go and talk to someone, you can literally say those phrases. Someone will ask you in Japanese, how's your day? What have you been doing? You literally have written it and memorized it and used it and created it in your journal. A lot of times this comes from another perspective, how to improve someone's communication with another person. And even if you're not learning a new language and you're writing in your common language, it helps actualize and internalize for actual conversation. So if you're not learning another language and you're writing your native language, it still helps with communication because you've expressed these things before. So the closest bridge is now you're expressing it to a stranger. So if you're doing this in a language you're learning, then you'll naturally have phrases that you'll say. Like I say "Saikin do desu ka?" all the time because I ask myself, okay, so what have I done recently? That would be the first phrase I write in my head. You don't have to literally write things, but it's kind of nice if you literally wrote it. You can take screenshots, you can take pictures, any way of exercising that. And that's kind of how you would do homework, so to speak, and testing, at least in my opinion. And I do that every single day, actually. I do like a smaller version every single day, and I do a bigger version every week, and I do a really big version every month. And then it can get longer and longer, bigger and bigger over time. It won't feel like it's a chore. It almost feels like you do it every day. Like then when you express to people and when you talk about things in that language, it will become natural because you've done it all the time, which is my quote unquote advice, I suppose, for how to feel natural in a different language or talk about something you're not used to talking about. Like, for example, explaining biology to a room of chemists. Well, I spent most of my time writing in my lab notebook and writing what I observed and stuff. So I basically turned that into something I explain to the chemists. Because even if it's a different language, even if it's the same language, if you're talking about different topics, it can be very difficult. When a biologist talks to a chemist, it is very, very difficult to understand, even in the same language, as though they're speaking a different language. With German, you're not able to respond fluently. It's frustrating because I know what they say, but feels like you're tongue-tied. I can understand that quite a bit. I choose, so like I'm an immersion baby, so whenever my parents are speaking Mandarin with other people, I can't express it in Mandarin. However, I do substitute it with a different language. So instead of trying to constantly have a negative reinforcement and a negative frustration, I say the words I'm able to say, but then substitute it with anything else. And then over time, you can do the same with journaling. So when I said journaling, like write in a target language, but anytime you forget what it is, substitute it with your current language. Then you'll know those are the parts that will, so you're actively still constructing language. However, you also get perfect reminders of where you want more in there. So to me, that's kind of the way I've learned personally in my life. So my Fujianese, my mother tongue that's not being educated on, is developed through this explanation. So I talked to my parents like, 좋은 refrigerator, 李明生, right? So over time, my parents also does the same thing to acquire English words implicitly, and it doesn't hamper their ability to be fluent. As in, what I mean is, they're not tongue-tied when they're asking and using English. They're substituting, so they're still comfortable, and eventually they start forming sentences in that way. So the whole like tongue-tying thing may also come from the idea that you need to be complete in order to feel less tongue-tied. However, you can bridge that by being less tongue-tied in the process. So then learning becomes very positive. As in, oh yeah, man. Nihongo o benkyou to do? Shimasu, right? Right. So like you're still forming the sentences. You're still making effort. And what happens now is that every time you forget a word, you get it's positive, as in, oh, I know what word I'm looking for there. Let's go and look for it. And then next time we'll get to use it, right? Nihongo o benkyou shimasu, right? As opposed to, staying back and say like, I won't ever say the sentence until I know the whole sentence. And journaling can do that too. So journaling and doing wrap-ups will reveal to you like, oh yeah, that's a spot. I want to go back and look for that. And that creates an active thing. So then Duolingo and Anki isn't removing that from, like, you're putting in effort now to look for words that you want to use while being aided and supplied by framework of Duolingo and Anki. Duolingo and Anki is there to inspire you to create sentences that you're wanting to express. And the sooner you get into that mindset, you're no longer tongue-tied, because all the sentences are sentences you want to use, as opposed to the stuff that they want you to use. Eventually, you could end up using those. However, ultimately, the most important way to feel less tongue-tied is being able to express it in the first place. Regardless if it's weird or something like that, it promotes a positive learning lesson. Frustration, constant frustration, is something that will probably stop people dead in their tracks, which try not to be so frustrated. And having a not all of us, right, have the privilege of having a speaking partner who doesn't make you feel frustrated. So ultimately, strategies like journaling helps one become comforting. It helps you be like, it's okay, right? It's okay to not know this. At least I have an English word for it, or I have another, word for it. And for the time being, I'll go look it up. But I know all these other words too. It doesn't stop me from using the Japanese. Like, you're not waiting to use the Japanese. You're constantly using the Japanese while waiting on new words. And that can be far less frustrating. And you already told me that tests and homework already works well. So having a type of homework and tests regularly for yourself that you like to do might work even better. And that's typically why I ask people if they have anything that works already. Because now that you're self-studying, you can turn any of the things that used to work into something even better. Because now you care about it by yourself. So, yeah. Hope something in there inspires something that you can turn into something that's useful, right? I know it's not an exact answer, because I typically don't have exact answers. Usually learning deals with understanding very quickly as possible what works and what doesn't work for that person, and then taking what works and then blending it so that it becomes regular. As for copying mainstream, okay, I think it was still open, but I didn't go to it. There were so many arcades. I just went to a few and I was already walking past. Oh, okay, fair enough, Greg. When you went, because Sega arcades recently closed down, so all the Sega arcades are gone now. If not, maybe converted to something else, or they have new owners. I saw it in my Like a Dragon game, which is funny. That's how I learned about it, because Like a Dragon is a property of Sega, and then when they go to reproduce the cities, they had to rename or rename the buildings that used to have the Sega arcades in them, because Sega no longer have those arcades, interestingly enough. Honestly, was kind of disappointed after the first one. Not that it was a disappointing experience, but I went into a few and they were all basically the same, had all the same machines as each other. Well, yeah. After I went into a couple times, I stopped going in them because there was just other stuff I wanted to see. That's fair. I think the two most notable arcades are Osaka and The one in Kobukicho? Kobukicho? I don't know if you went to either of those. I think if you went into the Kabukicho one, the theater square one, you pretty much have gotten the novelty already. You had a friend who took Japanese in uni, and a part of what they do was a diary. I think like once a week they had to try to explain something they did that week. Yep, that's pretty much it. You are learning two similar languages at the same time. How do you not mix them up? That is a general myth about languages. When you or not about languages, but about how minds work, in my opinion. I'm a person who practice association in order for memory. So not only is it not common to mix them up, it actually reinforces each other. So for example, if you're learning biology, it's not uncommon to learn something related to biology, like microbiology and molecular biology. So the idea is some people spend a lot of time learning and focusing on differences or how the degree of their differences. And yes, that provides a lot of contrast. However, if you practice associating things that are the similarities, like the same kanji, if you practice on doing that, you become very efficient at remembering things, because remembering one thing makes you remember the other thing. So oftentimes, that's what I leverage. It is something about practicing, right? So it is a practice skill. But generally speaking, for me, learning two different languages will take a lot more effort and difficulty than learning two similar at the same time. So I deliberately did this choice as a test, right? Japanese is really far from English, but it's closer to Mandarin. And that's kind of the experiment here. And then that's why I have no concerns about Spanish, because Spanish is kind of close to English, but I already have schooling on that. And now I have both angles. I worked on my study techniques on how to introduce myself to a language that's very different, and then how to maintain that with things that are very similar. You have ADHD, so it's hard to care without some sort of deadline. So I tried that with planning dedicated time. I'm learning Japanese now, so that you are saying is very helpful for this. Yeah, and think of it this way. If you need a dedicated time or an obligated time for yourself, think about it as journaling as a task. And I really understand that. Actually, a lot of times ADHD may be high functioning, and high functioning means you can get derailed, right? So you need some sort of regular stimuli, a regular stimuli that is predictable, repetitious, and self stimulating. So oftentimes, if you can think of it as a way of like, oh yeah, I'm challenging myself regularly to being really hyper focused on a task at hand. You may want to start with one every day, or like a 15-minute portion every day, then try to do it every other day, and then every 3 days, and then every week, and see how far you can get out before you get distracted from that plan. And that will give you like a good range of determining when you get too distracted. So that and you can start at 30 minutes, then you can maybe try to make it longer, make it less, see when your attention span, right, when you start getting distracted. Ultimately, I can't answer these questions because it's up to you to test these. I usually start with the time. If I notice myself losing attention, then you have to go and make it more frequent, and then you adjust that. And at some point, maybe it gets easy enough that yeah, you can extend the time, or like you can decrease the amount of time, the exposure. So you can tweak your how to get to the point where like, yeah, I can keep to this. That's probably what I would suggest when it comes to that. I suppose I have worked with and talked with various students that may or may not have varying degrees of attention deficit. And oftentimes, allowing yourself to be able to find a way to fine tune when how frequent something has to be and how long it has to be is a great way to do it all yourself. So I would probably start with some arbitrary time, some arbitrary frequency, like maybe 30 minutes a day, journal 30 minutes a day. And then when you're very comfortable with that or not comfortable, you either increase the frequency or decrease the frequency. And you're still collectively learning, regardless of it. In fact, there is also the alternative. Well, you can add another depth, which is to constantly change it. If you constantly change it, then you're hyper focused on constantly changing it. So like if you're doing 30 minutes a day, do 31 minutes tomorrow, 32 minutes, 33 minutes, 34 minutes. What happens then is it keeps taking your attention to focus on increasing the length progressively. And at some point, you'll possibly reach a satisfying threshold. And that can create discipline as well. So, and you want to change it in an increment that you can feel the impact, but at the same time, it's a small enough increment in which you can keep changing it back steadily. And that gives like a nice little place to focus. It's like a focal point. Like, oh yeah, what am I at? 32 minutes. All right. Tomorrow, 33 minutes. This number up here, day 121, is kind of, I do a routine that allows me to focus on how often and how long I've been doing these things. So I do journal a lot. And a journal doesn't necessarily have to be 15 minutes writing a whole page of stuff. It can be various parts in your life. So for me, I record certain things. I make sure things are organized. I go through like my videos and I sort them. So these routines create hyper focus centers that allow one to kind of stick to some sort of deadline or some sort of routine, if that helps. I myself do not know if I have ADHD or not. There are a lot of telltale signs that someone would suggest I might be slightly high functioning. With that said, and lots of the routines that I talk about tend to overlap with some of the routines or activities that other people do to try to negotiate ADHD. So hopefully that helps. Right. Just to give you a perspective that I'm coming from here. Most if you don't relate, you might be okay. Like not like you might not have as much of a attention deficit as you might think. Kind of thing. I find that oftentimes nowadays people are very hyperstimulated, whether they are high on the spectrum or not. And my advice or some things that I describe, I don't advise people professionally, so keep that in mind. I don't advise people professionally. However, the things I describe that I do tend to resonate with other people. So this is why I stream Duolingo, by the way. Not that I only use Duolingo, but I tend to stream Duolingo to illustrate that someone like myself who can be easily distracted or suddenly hyper focused can do the same with some sort of routine. Sounds like we are similar in the routines part. Yeah, guess even with working out, I journal everything. Yep, I journal all my runs. In fact, I actually record that to some extent publicly so everyone can see the shorthand that I use for like recording my runs every day. So yeah, and since you already do that, associate your language learning journaling with your current journaling. It's not a big bridge, right? It's actually a very familiar bridge. So do that with active total recall, is what I call it. The total recall thing. Give yourself a blank piece of space and recall and write something in Japanese. And it becomes very easy, in my opinion, to express that to someone else in the future because you have done it already. You have practiced it. In fact, when I'm journaling in Japanese, every once in a while, I say it out loud, actually. I write and speak the words that I'm writing at the same time. So then when someone asks me, how's my day? I could say the things without worrying about writing them because I already practiced both writing and saying the things that I write. You know, use the most of an action. I had an old process with Spanish and I want to find time to learn it with Japanese, but man, I can't think about the amount of mind effort I need for it. I see. ¿Hablas español? Un poco. Un poco. Hablo español. Largely though, it's reading. Just reading. We'll have to get back to Spanish much later. Spanish is the last language that I will be adding to all of this. So at some point, we're gonna review Espanol. Someone asked me like, where do I think my Spanish is? Well, I haven't spoke rigorously or wrote Spanish rigorously in over 10 years. However, at the time that I stopped, someone asked me like what the level was. It's probably like at the beginning of intermediate. I think they would use B1. I would say maybe B1 is when I stopped. But since I'm out of practice, Virus recently likes to learn Spanish and they usually type. So it's kind of refreshing to be reminded of all the Spanish that I know or don't know, right? Heroko. It'll be eventually. We're gonna say another 6 months by the time I add Spanish. And Duolingo's Spanish is one of their flagship courses. So it will be very fun to see what Spanish feels weird or not weird to me. Yeah. Anyways, resuming. Let's go.
8月に面白いイベントがあります。
一緒に行きませんか？
大晦日に何をしますか？
大晦日。New Year's Eve? 大晦日に何をしますか？ Let's see. What are you going to do on New Year's Eve? Oh, is it apostrophe New Year's Eve?
大晦日にどんなイベントがありますか？
So what's happening? Oh yeah, countdown. Oh my gosh, countdown. Countdown があります。Man.
10月にパーティーがたくさんあります。
Tatsuka. Alright. That's enough. 4 is good. Keep it to 4. Tatsuka, keep it to 4. 10月にパーティーがたくさんあります。Okay. There are a lot of Oh yeah, no worries. This is why I stream. No worries. Oh, trust me. I stream a very long time on Duolingo, but I'm gonna be honest, over 50% of the time it's not actually me using Duolingo to learn Japanese. It's oftentimes talking about it. I think it's definitely I learn best this. Um so if I can't explain what I'm doing, then I haven't learned very much, have I? And not necessarily, I'm not just at the moment I'm not even, it's not just that I'm learning Japanese, I'm also learning how I learn language, because technically it's been a really long time since I learned a language, and the last time I learned a language it was in high school and college, and that was a very different time, right? It was structured. This is my first time I've ever self-studied, so I'm learning quite a lot from other people, talking with other people, sharing ideas. So learning while learning, and learning a language while learning about learning, right? You gotta maximize your time use. Otherwise, and you're still in college though? Okay, okay. What are you studying in college? For the record, I know how other streamers may be like, oh yeah, don't interrupt and whatnot, but to me, if I was self-studying Japanese and I didn't want to be interrupted, I mean, I would not stream, right? So I know how that sounds to other people. However, for me, don't be sorry about that. That's largely the whole reason why I'm streaming. Otherwise, we would all be just, I'd be hitting the books and whatnot, right? It's not, and I also chose Duolingo because it's a platform that you can stream it, right? Otherwise, it'd be like, I don't know, I'll have a video of whatever people like to watch, and I'd be like on Pimsleur or something, and because time is money, I'd be using other things, right? Your major is biology? Oh, pharmacology, huh? Interesting. You don't happen to be Asian. Do you? No, I'm just kidding. I'm being stereotypical now. Pre-pharmacy sounds like a second gen Chinese, probably. If you're American. I'm doing this for fun. Sorry, it's not. It's for humor here. But a lot of times when you think of biology and pre-pharmacy, and someone who has an interest in Asian language, and then have a routine and fairly analytical in terms of their approach, oftentimes it's like diaspora, and if they have American idioms on top of that, it might be second gen Asian American. You're not? And you're trying to get into a pharmacy school? All right, cool. Have I watched MHA? What is MHA? Let me think. What could MHA? My Hero Academia? I have, but I stopped. I didn't catch up. So I watched it until they did the filler arc in like season 8 or something like that. So that's as far as My Hero Academia goes. Texka. So you're not Asian. Interesting. Biology, huh? Biology pre-pharmacy? Sorry, I was trying to be funny because I'm Asian American, and my immediate family, like when you think about prospective career moves, oftentimes hobbies are not associated with their prospective career moves, and often it's either pharmacy, some form of very productive engineering, or they are becoming doctors. They're pre-meds. I was none of them, but scientists is, I guess it's fine. My parents understood. So you want to get into pharmacy school? Nice. How are you juggling all of these self-studying with your pharmacy, or like your education right now, your major? Oh, and how is college now, wherever you are. I don't actually know what kind of college system you're in, but how is that? I haven't met a lot of people who talk about formal education too often, especially if you're in the United States, because formal education is kind of a struggle and a half at this point. Have I watched Seven Deadly Sins? I have, except if there's... I haven't watched the most, maybe 1 or 2 seasons. I have watched, or the last season, probably. I'm missing the last season. Like, I haven't seen it, but like I haven't seen the last season. I've seen most of Seven Deadly Sins. A lot of studying and dedication. Well, what do you do on Twitch, Kamiya? Just to give you a background, I know you didn't ask. However, just to frame all of this, what I wanted to do in my life for a while now was to teach college students at the undergrad or the graduate level. I did go to school for science. So I went to college for biochemistry and molecular biology. And then I went to graduate school for biology. And my focus was in virology and molecular biology, right? Genetics. And then I graduated from there. And then now the rest is kind of history. So I've always really had a passion for teaching college students. Your college students like you are in like that comfortable intersection between people who have decided they want to be learners for the rest of their lives, like scholars, and they're committed to it, right? While still requiring guidance and life experiences from those before them. So I really love like those college years. The first 4 years of college. Those are the people that I tend to communicate with fairly often. You use Twitch now for languages mostly? I see. Send help for that cat? What do you mean send help? Like, oh, wait, I don't know what reference that is, Texka. What do you usually watch on Twitch for language these days? Actually, how far is your Japanese, by the way? Kamiya. I don't know if you were here, but I describe my Japanese as I think I can talk to a third grader in Japan. That's about where I would conservatively place myself at the moment. Maybe a third grader. You watch anyone really? And if they can speak English, I watch that. Oh, interesting.
8月
What kind of what is your background in English? English is my common language, and if at all, I use English the most. Outside of, like, you will probably only hear 80 to 90% of the time it's probably English.
8月
And I only started learning another language exactly the same day I started Duolingo. Japanese and English. I see what you mean. Oh, if they're bilingual, right? Like, or at least they have a command of English. I see. Interesting. How many, are you able to find that kind of thing on Twitch? I don't really think I understand if there's even a scene for that. Lots of other people suggested things to me, and I have seen a few streams where it's largely the person who speaks Japanese and they're trying their best to be comprehensible in Japanese, as opposed to someone who keeps going back and forth between English and Japanese. less of those examples. I learn that way most of the time, as opposed to learning where most people use solely one or the other. Yeah, a lot of those. I see. Fair enough.
食べ物
Yeah, this is completely new for me. Usually I use video games. For the longest time, occasionally there might be one or two strangers who are interested in a video game that I've been playing, and a lot of times I use the video games as a way to talk about life routines or like studying routines or emotional awareness routines. So I typically use video games as a way to like, how do you moderate video games so that they don't affect you negatively over time, that kind of thing. And it's kind of like studying or falling in love with learning a language and then suddenly falling out of love with learning a language because it becomes increasingly frustrating. There's definitely parallels that you can draw between how a hobby in a video game and a hobby in language learning kind of goes through the same paths. So the idea of me learning language now is not that much different as how I'm approaching English or like playing video games. However, the thing that is different is the people I meet have a different perspective. Unlike me, people who think of language learning as something different altogether. So they approach language learning different from the way they approach other hobbies or other habits. And for myself, I don't. It's largely to connect with younger people who may be having like schedule issues or prioritizing and whatnot. So it's kind of fun challenging myself to figure out how to make language learning like video games and video games like language learning. How do you say I love large donuts in Japanese? 大きいドーナツが好きです。or が好き。Foxが。Oh, 大好き. Sorry, 大好き. That you said I love large donuts. 大きい. So it kind of looks like this. Oops. Am I? Don't. Is there? Oh no. Is there a t? Don't. Not. Oh. It's probably this. No. Wait. It might, yeah, it might be with a t. Whoops. Yeah, it's with a t. No, maybe it's a donuts. No. It's probably this. Donatsu. Donatsu ga daisuki desu. Fax ga. Oki donatsu ga daisuki desu. I love large donuts. Right? I don't. You might have to check on donatsu. Let's look at donatsu. Because katakana is hard. Nope. It's not. It's do the do is held out. So donatsu. Yeah, that. Donatsu. Daisuki desu. The katakana part is kind of rough all the time for myself because the mora, they keep changing up the mora. So like donut, I say donut. I don't say donut. But in Japanese, people they when they capture it, they think certain syllables are longer and certain syllables are shorter, right? But since I speak English regionally different. Um, the mora is the tus and like the regional accent will change how easy or hard a katakana word is, right? Like don't like I don't say donut like Homer Simpson says it like donut. Like I don't say that. I say donut. So it's actually donatsu. So donatsu. There's no hold. However, if you say donatsu, I'm sure the Japanese person wouldn't confuse it. Maybe they might. I don't know. Because like I don't hold certain things. So the tsu, like the skipping things like and the n vowels and stuff, they change all the time in Japanese, but it depends. It depends which English they're using as a point of reference. Yeah, donut. I don't think I don't hold my doughs that much. But they do. Donuts. Okay. Your Duolingo, you're on section 2, and I know both hiragana and katakana and like 10 kanji. Excellent. Excellent. And how are you using Anki to complement your Duolingo or the other way around? You're also trying the Genki books. Ooh, you're yeah. If you're into someone, if you like bridging with English, I think of the two textbooks that are commonly thrown around, Genki is probably the one to go. If your preference is to use English as a bridging language, for sure. You're juggling a lot. Hopefully, you make time for that, and also, take some time to rest. Resting is kind of underrated for a lot of people, and I know that can be a little tough for someone that might be very high functioning. And you're very high functioning, finding time to rest, it can be a difficult challenge. Resting regularly helps, in my opinion, consolidate the exhaustion and allows your memory to be a little bit more salient. And you need time to pass in order to test yourself, right? So without passage of time, it's difficult to gauge whether you have long-term recall or not, right? You can rigorously study for 24 hours straight. However, without the passage of time, you can't tell how much diminished return you might be encountering. Because oftentimes, some people might discover, the same person might discover, they spend 4 hours a day doing a task, and after optimizing themselves, like they are doing it, if they reduced it by 3 hours and they do a 1 hour session and capture like 95% of those 4 hour sessions, that's an idea of how much diminished return it is. So with the 3 extra hours, you could possibly do other things, or you could also rest if you're not interested in other. And it's very difficult to appreciate that sometimes if you're really high functioning. I just pile on more things. So if I can do something faster by happenstance, I'll just pile on more things because I liberated time, right? That can happen as well. Entering that cycle of optimizing your life over and over again as a high functioning person.